Hello and welcome to Prospects to Pros, sponsored by Invesco QQQ, the official ETF of the NCAA. I am your host, Nate Tice. We have our first mailbag of the season, first mailbag that we have done as a pairing, as a duo, the duo being me, Nate Tice, and as always, the athletics draft expert, Dane Brugler. How you doing today, Dane?
I'm doing good. Still feeling a little numb from that Chubb injury last night, but you know what? It's you gotta power through, and it's just I don't know. I think all of us in the NFL around the league just it couldn't happen to a better guy. You know, that's the
Right,
thing. And
right.
so it's if anyone could battle back from it, it's Chubb. He has a guy that had a left knee injury before. The guy's he's made out of vibranium anyways. Like he's going to be able to bounce back. It's just how long is it going to take? And the Browns have some contract decisions to make at the running back position. So what does this mean for the Browns this year? There's so many in the way, especially the way the game played out last night.
Right.
So many questions come from that injury, but it's just a shame because such a good player, such a good guy.
By all accounts, supposed to be just a tremendous human, just a tremendous person and everything. Great teammate, everything you want from a football player. And I think there is something about when a guy gets hurt and it's just that look of defeat right away, like where
Mm,
it's just like they know, where they're just
yeah,
like, yeah, that's it. That one, those are the ones that I mean, yeah, a person really making a lot of noise when they get hurt too, but like those are the ones that just like, man, they really sink in, especially a star like that, like you're saying. And I think it's going to be extremely interesting for what happens with this Browns team because of some of the struggles with the passing game
yeah.
and some of the stuff that they're trying to blend together. So a lot of elements. I hope Nick Chubb comes back because he's one of the best players in the league at any position, and I mean, just such a dynamic talent. So hopefully it gets healthy. That does stink.
Yeah.
That does stink overall. It really
Big
does.
opportunity for Jerome Ford,
Jerome Ford.
second year guy who I think you liked him maybe a little bit more than I did, but
Yeah.
I got that like fourth round type of
Yeah.
grade on
And that was a
him.
third round. It wasn't like I was
Yeah,
super, super high. Yeah, but
right, and so this is a big opportunity. I mean, he has speed, he's got
yeah,
some burst to him. It's just a matter of, and he's playing behind a really good offensive line.
right.
But to your point about the passing game, I mean, Stefanski and Watson have to be on the same page, or
Yeah,
it's not going to matter. So it's going
right.
to start with the quarterback and play caller, and then how everything just uh, evolves from there. That'll
Yeah.
kind of tell the story of the rest of this Brown season.
Yeah, that the floor of that run game was so high with Chubb that they could have time to take their time with the passing game. And now it's like, well, this has got to be show ready. Like you're
Yeah,
on air like very, very quickly. And I think people were starting to realize what we saw last season from that passing game with Deshaun Watson. And now early this season, it's like, yeah, this is becoming a trend. And now, like you
yeah,
said, I like Jerome Ford, but he's not Nick Chubb.
no.
So it's going to be very, very interesting the next couple of weeks. So having said all that, got a little weekly talk with that. Let's get to our first mailbag question. I'm excited to do this. Thank you guys sending in all the responses on Twitter and to my email. I've learned a lesson to maybe make a separate email for this type of stuff. So lessons learned as you're hosting your first mailbag question, but from mailbag show. So here's the first question from Arrowhead Price from Twitter. He noticed his tweet. I've noticed a deliberate avoidance of Michael Penix Jr. Is this just the injury history? Is the league just way out on him for that reason? Others in draft media see him as a possible QB3 for 2024. Dane, where do you want to start with Michael Penix Jr. from Washington, quarterback?
Yes, Washington quarterback. I this is a legitimate Heisman contender.
Yeah,
This is a guy that is you can make the argument Washington is one of the best offenses in college football. This is a legitimate college football playoff contender. The Pac-12's got a lot of good quarterbacks. Michael Penix is right up there in terms of college quarterbacks. Now, as a prospect, I've studied all three of his games this year. I think the number one takeaway from his film is the Washington receivers are really good.
really.
Yeah, and we've talked about them a little bit before. Rome Odunze is one of the best in the country. Good size, speed athlete, really coordinated ball catcher. The accuracy with Penix, it's just okay. It's not. I would not call it a strength to his game, but that allows a guy like Odunze to consistently bail him out and really show off that catch radius. I mean, he's
It's the
making full
Calvin
extension
Johnson
grabs.
highlights.
Yeah, right.
Where he's catching
He's
behind him. It's like, oh, that's awesome. But it's like the throw's pretty crap.
right. Like there's so many of these targets that are going to him that I'm like, okay, why is he have to? Why are his feet off the ground right now? Like they shouldn't have to be,
Yeah.
but he needs to jump and make this full extension grab. Dunze, I mean, he made my top 50. No surprise. He's making a strong case for first round status. Jalen McMillan's probably the best route runner of Washington's wideouts. Works mostly out of the slot. Nice tempo. He can free himself
He's really
pretty
improved
easily.
too. I thought he's looked really good this year. Yeah, keep going. Sorry.
He has, yeah, no,
Yeah.
and then Polk, the other one.
Yep.
Washington could have 3,000-yard receivers this year. Like that. That's how good this offense is. But back to Penix, I just he's really confident. He's really aggressive as a quarterback, and I love his eagerness to use the entire field. But like I said, I don't think you come away from his film saying ball placement's a strength for him.
Yeah.
And on paper, I think people are maybe surprised by that because the completion percentage looks great. I mean, it looks awesome on paper, but the tape says something different. And aside from the receivers, Penix really benefits from that Washington offensive line. He has, I looked up, over 700 dropbacks at Washington the last year and change. He's been sacked only 5 times. The blocking is giving him time, sit in the pocket, find a target. So I don't know. What have your impressions been of Penix so far?
Yeah, the accuracy stuff comes up, and I think exactly what you say. You look at the stat lines, and then you look even how far he's pushing the ball, and you're like, oh wow, that must be something's cooking there. And there is something cooking. The offense is awesome. The designs are awesome. The pass catchers, like you mentioned, the offensive line. It's a really, really fun offense. And there is some talent. Like he does have some arm pop to his arm, and he can push the ball and drive the ball. There is so much issues with his footwork and his timing that's where I get very hesitant, especially for someone that has, he's an older player. And he also has medical history. So he also has those kind of blemishes to start off with. But he overstrides a lot as a thrower. And that's because
throws
he's
off
trying
the timing.
Yes, it makes things late. It's the Byron Leftwich problem. It makes things late. It's elongated and it leads to sprays, the overthrows. If you notice at Penix, he misses everything high. And if you're listening to this right now and you can't just stride like really long, like you're almost stretching, watch what your shoulder does. It lifts up. And that's what he does timing again. He gets away with it right now. And there's some times where he makes some good throws and it's good. But then there's times where it sprays. And like you said, the pass catcher jumps up and he's wide open anyways. So the room for error is just so great. He has the longer throwing process. And also just he's not the quickest processor at this point in time. It does take a second for him to pull the trigger. And then the trigger takes forever to pull.
Yes.
So it's
with the anticipation as well. Like he's a lot of times he's waiting for the receiver to come open or a guy to come out of his break.
Gun it in there.
Right. And then, okay, I'm going to fire it. And like you said, he can get away with that now against Pac-12 defenses or against Michigan State's defense. That's not going to be the case against NFL teams. And so, no, I agree. I mean, that matches up with my notes. I wrote down how inconsistent tempo in his drops. It easily throws off his timing, his accuracy. He can throw the ball 50 yards, no problem. But I think that like he has some really pretty 9 routes, post routes, where he's putting the ball out for his receivers to go make a play. But on some of the more timing throws, and he can drive it, but because he does wait, there are often times where there are throws he shouldn't make where it's from the opposite hash and he's trying to go the other way. And I love that eagerness to use the entire field, but he's just not going to get away with those throws with his level of arm strength in the NFL.
There's not a lot of finesse there right now. And it's just, you want to see when you're taking a guy, especially as people are talking about him as like, want to anoint him as a first rounder. It's like, no, there's gotta be so much more time.
Right. We're talking about him in the context of quarterback 3. We're not saying like shouldn't be drafted and he belongs in the CFL. And
I have like a late 3rd, early 4th on him right now. I'm kind of hovering that 4th round range with him right now. And
there's a much better chance of him going 4th round than being a true contender for quarterback 3. I think that's fine. Like that's nothing to scoff at. That's
quarterback.
Right, exactly. And he'll be drafted, he'll be in the NFL, he'll be in a camp, he'll be on a team, and we'll see where he goes from there. But based on what we've seen so far, I just don't think he's a realistic contender for quarterback 3.
Yep. And I would agree with that.
Okay.
All right. So our to the next one, also from Twitter. This is from Tyler Green with 4 N's.
There you go.
Yes. Does Shadur Sanders have a realistic chance to battle Drake Maye for the number 2 overall pick? Dane, what do you think there?
So I still think it's a long shot that anyone except Drake May is that second quarterback drafted. But it's September. I'm keeping an open mind to this because, for a few reasons. First, how Shadur Sanders has played. I did a film room this week on The Athletic, breaking down that Colorado State tape, and man, the poise and presence that he plays with is it's so impressive. It's not all perfect, but man, that poise that he plays with, there's something there. There's something to that. The other reason I can understand why some won't be head over heels about Maye because of some of the reckless tendencies. 3 games this year, he has the same number of interceptions as he does touchdown passes, and that speaks to an offense that's still trying to find itself. New offensive coordinator, the weapons are relatively new, so I still think that he'll finish with far more touchdowns and interceptions when it's all said and done. But this early, it's still an offense trying to find themselves. And this is also something interesting that I was talking to a scout about Sanders. He mentioned how with Sanders, he threw out the possibility he doesn't think Sanders is necessarily a lock to enter this draft. He might just choose to stay at Colorado one more year, and he made some good points. First, you have the NIL money. No, it's not the same as top 10 money, but if let's just say Sanders, he's considered a top 50 guy, but he's not convinced he'll be a top 10, top 15 pick.
Right.
Colorado's the biggest brand in college football right now. The NIL money that he can get from that, it's crazy. It could definitely make him feel better about putting off the NFL for one more year. And then secondly, you look at this Colorado roster, they're going to be in position to add some big time recruits or transfers in the transfer portal in this offseason. I mean, there's a lot of guys looking at what's going on in Colorado saying, I want to be part of that. I want to play for Dion.
Rocks on the sideline, Master P's on the sideline. Right. I want to be here.
In the current state of college football, you can just get up and transfer if you want. Like that, that's a thing. And so, obviously it's not quite that simple. I mean, it's much easier than it was before. And so you look at this Colorado team, you make a few additions in recruiting in the portal, they're a realistic contender for a national title in 2024. Remember, the college football playoff, they expand to 12 teams next year. So Travis Hunter will be back one more year. Would it really be a shock if they decide to run things back?
Right. And make it another little 2-year cycle and really launch themselves. Because we got to see once they get into the thick of the schedule too. So the USC and Oregon and all that.
That's it. Oregon this weekend. Yeah.
Yes. That's going to be very, very fun. I'm a big fan of Maye anyways. And I have Sanders has the first half of last game against Colorado State. And I watched every snap. That game was a lot of fun, just period. Yeah. I mean, I love late night football anyways, like late night football, West Coast games, but like that was some good stuff.
It's 2:30 on the East Coast when that game's over. And like, there's still, I was glued to the TV. I know a lot of people that were. It's crazy.
So many cool moments in that game, but and Sanders in the first half, I was like, okay, come on, like this, we got to see a little more. He wasn't really pushing the ball, and they were doing a great job of Colorado State's defense. And then when things opened up in that fourth quarter, and seeing him driving on some throws over the middle, yes, Colorado State was just running cover 2, but he hasn't beaten that yet. And now he's beating that, and that's what you want to see. And this is why I get high on guys, is they improve. You want guys to be launching into the league. You don't want them plateauing into the league. You want to see him getting better at the small things. So seeing him ascend in that second half has made me a little bit higher on him than maybe I was even going into that. Having said all that, I still don't think he's anywhere near at this point in time to Maye, even with the box score line with Maye. I don't think people, and I get it's North Carolina, they're playing middle of the afternoon games, not getting all these headlines like Colorado is even with the interceptions, which he's had 4. I'd say 3 of them I'm kind of mad at him about.
Reckless,
reckless, definitely. Just trying to do too much, which was my issue with him going into the year. Sometimes he tries to do a little too much. How he's responded to them and the throws that he makes and the athlete he is, he's really special, guys. Like I'm a big fan of him, but he does some things that are like up there Like to me, it's like almost basically, unless he just totally bottoms out, which I think it's the opposite. I think they're really finding their footing and really starting to ascend. I think he's just a marker in of top 5. That's how I view him anyway. So
I would
I think
agree with you. I mean,
yeah,
like I said, I'm keeping an open mind, but it
you
is a
can,
long shot that
it's a long
he's
shot.
going to fall out of top 5, fall out of being that
But it's
quarterback
not off the
2.
board, and that's what you were trying
Yeah,
to say too. Is that like anything can
right,
happen? We never know. Like
right.
look how fast Joe Burrow rose up the board. It's like, I know that's a once in a kind of decade kind of
Yeah.
thing, but it's like you never know. You just never know.
And that doesn't mean that's necessarily the right thing. I mean, Zach Wilson, for example. I
Right.
mean, the way he rose with the hot start he had at BYU, and
Yep.
in hindsight, how okay, maybe there were a few more red flags there, and but it happens. So yeah,
It
but
does.
no, I'm with you. Drake May, for all the reasons we liked him coming in,
Yeah.
those reasons are still there. And he's a player he is getting better, even if it
Yeah.
doesn't manifest itself in the box score.
He's the quarterback after my heart, man. Like he is just size, arm strength,
Yeah.
scrambling. He tries stuff every drive. He's trying big boy throws, and that gets him in trouble. But then it's just, man, he's got a really fun package. So I'm excited. All these guys, there's 20 quarterbacks we could talk about every week, and it's so cool watching them kind of the ebbs and flows of this week or of this season. Speaking of quarterbacks, and speaking of the QB3 race potentially, Adams Up Profit. Some of these Twitter handles are just so funny to say out loud. Adams Up Profit asked, what would JJ McCarthy, quarterback from Michigan, need to put on film this year to solidify himself as QB3 to you? What specifically do you see as a weakness in his game? Conversely, what are things he excels at? Dan, I know McCarthy was your QB3 going into the season.
Yeah.
After a month, what's kind of your updated take on McCarthy?
Well, 2 games going into the year, JJ McCarthy was looking like the no doubt quarterback 3 in this draft.
He was cooking.
He was looking great against subpar competition, but he struggled pretty bad against Bowling Green on Saturday, and that's what you worry about with him. It's all about consistency. And coming into the year, he was my quarterback 3 because of the size, the athleticism, the arm, the intangibles, all in the plus category. But I also put him at quarterback 3, projecting better consistency out of him throughout this season. And we have to remember this is second year as a starter, so he's still just a very young player. The rawness element to his game, it should be expected. But now, okay, you're second year as a starter. Let's see you turn that into more consistency. But this is a quarterback with all the tools, and so we're seeing his development in real time this year. He's a playmaker out of the pocket. I love his creativity. He's a 4-5 athlete, throws well on the run. I want to see him be more consistent, picking apart defenses from the pocket, especially when he has to step up, work on a second or third read. Can he do those things consistently and also be accurate? So, like I mentioned, was it East Carolina the first one, UNLV the second game? We saw those things where he was on point. He worked inside or outside of structure. He was delivering strikes to every level of the field. We saw anticipation throws. But then against Bowling Green, he reverted back to that inconsistent version, the raw version of McCarthy that we saw at times last year. And, the thing that I struggle with McCarthy also is with just the Michigan schedule. And it's really tough from an evaluation perspective.
It is.
They don't play anybody. I mean, they're going to be double-digit favorites until November.
Right. Yeah,
when they go to Happy Valley and face Penn State.
That's it.
So, and then obviously they'll have Ohio State and then beyond, whether that's the playoffs or whatever. But I just they've got Rutgers this weekend, which Rutgers is a solid defense. They've got a corner that could be drafted next year. They've got some guys, but just wish there was better competition to more fairly evaluate JJ McCarthy.
It's the good and bad, because you want to see them try what they do, see what they try to do against good competition and see what they can get away with or what they can accomplish, or see what punishes them. And so when you see it against lesser competition, you're kind of always like, is that kind of a fluke thing? Is that actually what you are? And what you're saying too with McCarthy is that my biggest thing with him was, well, one, adding to his frame, want to see that, but he is a good athlete. And so that's always one way to kind of mitigate it. And he has decent size, solid size, actually. Height. I mean, but frame, length and height. Yes. But was pushing to the outside sometimes, was that he would be that hair late that you were kind of just mentioning. And he has pretty good arm strength and everything, but it was just that, just like we mentioned with Penix, those windows are so much tighter at the NFL level. So I just wanted to see more. The guys get better at that as they anticipated a little bit more. I thought this past game against Bowling Green was him kind of making some rookie mistakes in the sense of, I'm on my first read and I'm hanging on it hell or high water. And I know I should be checking it down or getting to number 2 and then just still launching it anyways.
Yeah.
And it's kind of one of those, yeah, you can get away with it against Bowling Green. And yeah, you're trying some stuff, but the process of trying that stuff was a little bit, man, you don't want to see a guy doing that as they get more starts. That was like a freshman mistake. So I'm still not like, I mean, what did he show the first couple of weeks? I'm excited to see once this Big Ten schedule starts picking up and see how he operates. You're not going to get a ton of attempts out of him, just how Michigan plays. So you have to kind of, again, extrapolate what you do see. But I want to see him still trying stuff, but doing it more in the flow of the operation as opposed to kind of maybe going rogue.
And that's a great point, because against Bowling Green, I think he only had like 15 dropbacks. Right. And part of that was by design because he was struggling a little bit. 3 picks. The one in the red zone, he just wasn't fast enough with his eyes. He just wasn't seeing everything, especially with a condensed field like that. So yeah, it's something that, again, we're seeing him. This is such a pivotal year for his quarterback development, and we're watching it in real time. So, it's important not to overreact to the good and overreact to the bad, but just kind of take everything and the body of work as it presents itself. And so it's this quarterback 3 conversation. We've talked about it every episode, and we're going to be talking about it every episode moving forward. Probably it's going to come up in some form or fashion, because it will be in flux all the way through April. I'm guessing, as we kind of, debate how these quarterbacks shake out.
And all these guys have resumes that they can build off of. It's not like a lot of like, we're squinting to like make a guy happen. We're not trying to make fetch happen here. It's like, no, all these guys have cases, and it's not the end of the year once the draft cycle really picks up and everybody asks when the beast is coming out. This is September still. And that's the ebbs and flows of as a prospect and watching these guys. And that's sometimes we're going to talk about some guys after we have 4 weeks, 6 weeks to see. And that's really what it is at the end of the season. It's something I've benefited from the past. It's like, I'm going to start watching college film in January. And which games am I going to watch at JJ McCarthy? I'm going to watch Penn State. And I'm going to watch Ohio State. Now we have to respond to what he's doing right now. And that's the kind of fun of this. And also the things, like you said, you just don't want to get too high or low sometimes.
Right. Yeah, no, that's well said. It's double-edged sword.
Yeah. So next one on Twitter, Jay Chappy Stick. God. When you're in the middle of a play, I get it can be hard to want to slide or avoid hits if you're a big athletic guy like Anthony Richardson who doesn't shy from contact. What can the Colts do to get through to him on playing smarter? Or is this all on AR?
I love this question for you because obviously you're a big AR guy, Anthony Richardson, but you're also a big quarterback yourself. Like you have some perspective. Now, obviously, you're not a 4.3 athlete.
I didn't run a 4.4.
No, right. But it's he had the concussion on Sunday. If you're say you're the Colts quarterback coach, how do you suggest or train your quarterback to just not be as reckless, but without losing that aggressiveness? I mean, I don't think that you should stop calling quarterback runs. It's part of what makes Anthony Richardson, especially as a rookie, part of what makes him a productive quarterback. So how do you teach a guy like this to better protect himself?
And that's what you said right there too, is that it's always going to be him. Like that's an aspect of his game, is that he's going to be a runner. Like, and it's why not? He had the 2 rushing touchdowns they had on Sunday were beautiful. And he's not a reckless scrambler, which I will give him credit for, even in college. Like he doesn't run just to run. Like he truly is trying to work from the pocket. So that's nice, at least in that aspect. But as a true, when he does tuck it and he is trying to get the extra yards, is learning pick your fights. Is this the 4th quarter and we need a first down to win the game? Okay, do what you got to do. Is this middle of the 2nd quarter on a 2nd and 8 and you're getting 3 yards? Okay, you don't have to try and truck a linebacker. This is guys like Dante Culpepper had to go through this. Cam Newton is the number 1 example. Josh Allen has never learned this. he's still trying to do flips over guys in the middle of the first quarter on a 3rd and 20 when he's 10 yards short of the sticks. It's like some of these guys, you got to let them be athletes, and you can only say so much because then their instincts come into play.
Right.
But I think it's just that balance that you teach them. And I've always said, if you want to get through it at quarterback, is have them watch that 2016 week 1 Panthers versus Broncos game and watch the shots that the Broncos were taking on Cam Newton and how much that altered his career. And I mean, that was other hits accumulated, but just really got to drive home the message that sometimes throw the ball away, sometimes slide. It's so much more accepted to slide now. It used to be back in the day, if you slid, it's like, no, you get off the field. George O'Leary, when I was a freshman at UCF, was like, if you slide or run out of bounds, like, I'm taking you off the field. So it was, yeah. So like that's, some guys instill that, but nowadays it's like, no, we're paying you a lot of money. You're the star of the team. We're going to use you. We have to save you. But you just have to get through to them and learn that they're going to be that way. They're going to be a little bit of a wild horse. You want them to be, but it's just like, maybe save the 2-3 hits that will add up over the years.
I mean, Richardson's 245 pounds. So, you feel good about the body armor and the fact that he can be someone you feel okay taking a few hits a game. But to your point, it's all about picking and choosing where those hits are coming and making sure they're the juice is worth the squeeze. Right.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. It's now saying that and then dialing it home to him to make sure that he grasps that, especially in the moment. That's, it's like trying to tell Tim Tebow to change his throwing motion. Like, it's not that easy, like it's not.
Bullets are flying. You're going to go back. You're going to revert back to what you know. And so Anthony Richardson, I'm going to try and truck this guy over. It's these guys, they got here how they played their whole lives. Like that, you're, as a NFL coach, you're just giving them tools that they choose to use. And sometimes it cuts through and sometimes they use them, but sometimes they're going to just keep playing and we'll see. But he's been a lot of fun so far. Next one from our lad Cy. How would you compare the tight end groups from 2023 to 2024? The 2023 group was one of the deepest we have seen, but 2024 looks more top heavy with average depth. What do you think about this class so far, Dane, and how it compares to last year's class?
Yeah, that's a good question, and David's a good follow. By the way, if you aren't doing that already, he's when it comes to draft coverage, he's pretty good. This year's tight end class has a clear alpha at the top, right? With Georgia's Brock Bowers. I mean, this guy, he's someone else I included in my film room this week. His ability to find the hidden yards just blows me away. I mean, the athleticism is great, the speed's great, but his competitive toughness with the ball in his hands is awesome. I mean, he will carry guys 7-8 yards, and just those hidden yards add up over a game. It is really fun to watch. So, I mean, this is a top 10 pick. I don't really need to sell Brock Bowers that much. He's an easy top 10 or easy first round guy, likely top 10 pick. But he's the only tight end in this year's class that I really feel strongly about, would be drafted ahead of Dalton Kincaid or Michael Maye or Luke Musgrave or Laporta. So I think the 2023 class at tight end, which, we talked about so much leading up to the draft last year, I think it's stronger. And I think it is more top heavy with the exception of Bowers. Jatavion Sanders from Texas is really athletic. I think he can be a weapon, but he's not clearly above those guys we mentioned drafted top 40 last year. I think, we both like Ohio State's Cade Stover as a top senior. Kansas State's Ben Sinnott is criminally underrated. I think he should be a day 2 pick, but he's not a top 40 guy necessarily. So I think that there's a few other tight ends in this class that really help the depth, but compared to last year, I don't know. I give the clear edge to 2023, both top heavy and depth, with the exception of Bowers.
How Bowers, I would probably had it over Mayer, I think, pretty easily last year as well. Totally different types of players, but good in their own right. Bowers is a true difference maker as a pass catcher, while I think Mayer is like ultimately super useful and totally different styles. But then the tight end, if any of those guys that went, we had Laporta, Tucker Kraft, Schoonmaker, any of those guys that were like tight end 4, 5, 6, 7, I would have as tight end 2 in this class. I think that's the best way I could put it. Just because I do like a couple of the guys, the ones that you just mentioned, the Kansas State tight ends are really fun, like kind of a Swiss Army knife type. but I
Right.
view that more as like, third roundish, kind of a
Hmm.
luxury kind of guy, a good teamer and everything, almost like Noah Grayish. I know he went
Right.
day 3, but maybe kind of like a plus size version of that. And I think the other ones are more, receiving only, which I always kind of knock back. While I thought a lot of the guys last year were good receiving onlys type ends, but a lot of guys that had path to be that true inline Y, which I think is ultimately more valuable. So I would say Bowers is a true difference maker, a true needle mover. But then after that, all that big chunk of day 2 guys that went last year, I would have ahead of what's going on right now in this class. But it's
Yeah.
not a bad class. It's just that
No.
last year's class was just exceptional.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We see it the exact same way.
Okay, awesome. All right, so next one is Mike Smelts, also on Twitter. If you had to rank, in parentheses, a loose ranking, the top 4 position groups for the upcoming draft, what would they be?
So obviously we don't know, underclassmen are going to come out and things like that. So it's early to do
Normal
this, but
caveats.
yeah, at this point in the year, I think I'd go with offensive tackle at number one.
Yeah.
You have the absolute stud at the top with Penn State's Olu Fashanu,
Yep.
and then potential for just amazing depth. I had more offensive tackles in my top 50 than any other position. We also got a bunch of Olu questions, so we can talk about him right
Yeah.
now. I mean, this guy is. I've only had the chance to talk to him once, but he blew me away as a person. Just talking to him, he's extremely smart.
Can tell.
Y- yeah, he's very so just away from the tape as a guy, as someone who he has a very keen understanding of his strengths as a player. Like the cognitive ability there is really blew me away. You could tell he studies this. You could tell that he cares. The type of guy that once he dials, really commits himself to something, that's all he does. And he focuses on it and he picks it apart and he perfects it. And then of course you watch the tape and you're like, oh gosh, the way this guy moves, the body control, the coordination, the feet, the play strength. Not a perfect player. A lot of times his hands are late.
Mhm.
Uh,
He'll
pass
fall
rushers
off he'll fall off at run
yeah,
block
he
sometimes.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
Pass rushers are making the first contact, first meaningful contact, which he can anchor and halt that pretty quickly. But when you're going to go up against NFL pass rushers, obviously you want to be a little more combative and control the rep. But this is a guy that has a lot of what you want in a tackle that you're considering top 5 and top 7 picks. So yeah, I think offensive tackle is the first position that came to mind,
Yep.
and Olu at the top's a big reason for that.
I love him. I think he's just an
Well,
awesome player.
we had another question about the Olu. If you're a team and you have needs at both receiver and tackle, um, Olu versus Marvin Harrison conversation. Like, how do you? And then this reminds me of a couple years ago with Jamar Chase versus Penny Sewell.
So,
With the Bengals at 5, and that was a big talking point. And
yeah.
which direction you go. And I think
Ooh.
at the end of the day, it comes down to who do you just envision making the bigger impact for your team?
Yep.
It's hard to find either one of those guys. But I think I in this situation, as much as I love Olu, I would lean Marvin Harrison Jr. just because he's so different,
He's
so
special.
special in
Yeah.
what he offers. So I would go. It'd be harder to find a Marvin Harrison than it would be to find an Olu Fashanu. Not that you're going to find either one of those guys as a plan B, but I think it'd be harder to find the receiver in that scenario. But it's still an interesting thought process.
Well, I think it speaks to both players, like even for me, like who can be very hard on receivers, especially taking them early. I have no qualms with taking Marvin Harrison Jr. in top 5.
Yes.
It's like I just, yeah, he's that special. The fact that Olu is even in the consideration, and even for me, I would maybe in certain team makeups, I go, well, yeah, I'll take the tackle over base. Again, it's all going to come down to the team. The fact that he's even in that conversation with how high we are on Marvin Harrison Jr. is like speaks to Olu and the ability that he has. I love him. I think he's fantastic. He's one of the best tackle prospects I've watched in a while. And he only gets better. And it's really cool just watching technique. You said you spoke to his intelligence, and you can see that in the film even last year. Whereas when defenses run blitzes and games and twists, his eyes are perfect. And the fact that he doesn't have a ton of starts and he's already showing that, I should say perfect, that's mean, but it's as good as you could hope for someone that has that many starts. And It's just, yeah, he's especially with the athletic traits and everything. Also outside of tackle, how did you rank the top 4 position groups? So you went tackle first.
Tackle first. Second, I'd go quarterback.
I went QB. Yeah.
Yeah, star
Yeah.
power at the
Same.
top,
Yep.
obviously, and then just the quarterback 3 conversation, the depth that
Yeah.
we'll see throughout day 3. It'll really be interesting which quarterbacks say, "Man, screw this, I'm going back to school because
Right.
this is ridiculous." Even all-star games, like, the Senior Bowl, doing their cut list to, I mean, I think they're gonna have to take 8 quarterbacks. Sometimes some years they only take 6. I think you're gonna have
Yeah.
to take 8. Shrine Game, same thing. But no matter if you go to the Shrine or the Senior Bowl as a quarterback, there's enough of these all-star spots to go around that there's going to be a lot of these quarterbacks, a good chance to show off what they can do. So, yeah. Did you go offensive tackle at 1 too?
I went tackle 1, QB
Okay.
2, and then
All
I
right.
went receiver 3, but I'm actually curious where you went.
That's where I
Number
went.
3.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Again, it's like tackle. You have the stud at the top with Marvin
Yep.
Harrison.
Yep.
Several other first round possibilities. The senior class of receivers, I don't think is as necessarily exciting as we've had
Mhm.
in other years. Malachi Corley, Western Kentucky receiver, I like quite a bit. Had a pretty good game against Ohio State over the weekend. But even him, he's not a first round guy, probably not a top 50 guy. But still, the underclassmen that we
Yeah.
potentially see coming out. I know we have a wide receiver question later. I think we'll get to. That's something that you see the depth, the potential depth, and it's
Yeah.
easy to get excited about some of these weapons.
Oh, I mean, even just watching random games, or I should say random, but Colorado State. Here comes Horton from Colorado State.
Yeah.
And I think you said he was a borderline top 100 guy for you, or trying to make a case for that. And
Coming into the year, yeah. I mean, and that's
yeah.
what I wrote about him last week going into that game. It was funny because last week for my NFL Draft Watch, my weekly article, I was thinking, all right, we have no ranked matchups this week. Like, what am I going to write about? And I was like, oh, okay.
Right.
I was like, this is perfect. It's a perfect weekend to watch a group of five prospects. So, okay, watch Western Kentucky against Ohio
Yeah.
State to check out Malachi Corley, to check out Austin Reed, the
Yeah.
quarterback. These guys will be drafted, probably in the top 125, 150 picks. Also, Torrey Horton, he's the one that led off the article against all eyes are on Colorado, but
Yeah.
Colorado State has a receiver who he's long, he's got speed, he's going to run the 4.4s.
He was great.
Really good ball skills.
He was
Yeah,
so
I want to see him get a little bit bigger. He's really
Yeah.
lean. But
But
he's a
I mean,
guy.
they're killing him with all those crossing routes, but I was so impressed with how he got north and was bouncing off guys. Like, he was
Mhm.
creating like 5-6 yards of pop, which for a long leggy guy like that, getting north like that was super impressive how twitchy he was. So sorry to cut you off, but he really impressed me on Saturday night. I was really, really big fan of his.
I was glad that he was able to have that type of stage to kind of
Yeah.
tell people, "Hey, I'm a legitimate guy." And yeah, so coming into that game, I thought he was a third, fourth round pick with a chance to get a little bit higher as we get closer to the draft. But yeah, that's Torrey Horton's that's a good shout out. He's a top 5, top 6 senior receiver this year.
Yeah. There's some interesting guys that are kind of really come to fruition. And then what was the 4th position you had on your list here?
So I think you could say edge rusher. I think
Okay.
we've been underwhelmed, right, by the guys at the top, but they're
there's depth.
still
Yeah.
first round, top 40 type of guys. Guys that could be useful and maybe develop into more. I think defensive tackle is a really strong group.
Mhm.
They've got a case for this spot. I'm going to say corner.
Okay, I said quarter, so I actually thought you were
Okay.
going to go edge there, but so we had the exact same top.
There we go.
4.
Well, hey,
I was
we're on the same
actually curious
page.
where you went. I actually was curious where you went with the number 4 here. I kind of went corner by default just because it had a
Yeah.
little bit more at the top, I thought, than edge did. So, but I want to hear kind of your case as well. You know way better than I do.
Well, and like wide receiver, the volume of guys, right?
Yeah.
We have so many corners that it makes it easier to be excited about the depth and just because there's so many options. So I like the corners at the top, and the depth's really promising. So yeah,
Nice.
I think that's I mean, we've got a question coming up talking
I was
about
going
more
to say
corners, right?
we got a great segue coming up right here. The
There we
next
go.
question is Alex Katzen. How do you see the corner class right now? Seems like there isn't a solidified number 1 guy right now. Is it fair to say we might only see 1 or 2 in round 1?
I'm more optimistic than that. I think we'll see, at least 3 in the first round, maybe more. Kool-Aid McKinstry, he's not going to be from Alabama corner. He won't be for everyone, but he's a terrific prospect.
Yeah.
not going to run a 4.42, and the speed won't necessarily blow you away. But he's just he's a smart, good sized player, has length, knows how to use it. There's just a lot to like about Kool-Aid. I'm still super high on Nate Wiggins from Clemson. I think he's the best defensive player on that team. Just doesn't get enough credit.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why many are sleeping on him. He's a first round guy.
Of all the guys, he looks the part. Like, I mean, Kool-Aid does too, but like I look at him and how he moves, I'm like, that's a corner. That's an NFL corner right there. So sorry to cut you off again, but I'm glad you highlighted Nate Wiggins before the season, because I got to kind of keep an eye on him as the season's gone along.
Yeah, he had a pick six. It's against FAU, but still, he had a pick six on Saturday. So making some plays out there. Cooper DeJean from Iowa. This is a first round player.
He's awesome,
I'm not budging on that take. He's a first round player. One of the best all around DBs in college football. Kalen King from Penn State. He's also in the mix. So I mean, that's four. That's four. Yeah, that's four right there. And then look, we always have guys at the position that they rise throughout the season. Last year it was Deonte Banks, right, from Maryland.
Yes.
2 years ago, Northwestern, Greg Newsome to the Browns. He was a late riser that even for scouts, I know talking to some scouts, didn't really. And he was an underclassman too, so they hadn't done enough work on him at that point. But it wasn't until November, December that they realized, oh, okay, this guy's legit. So this year, who's going to be that guy, that corner who rises up late? Ohio State's Denzel Burke. He's been awesome through 3 games. He looked more like that 2021 version of Denzel Burke as a freshman, when he looked like a future first rounder. So that I think. This is a position where it's a stopwatch position, so we can see late risers all the time. But we also see some athletes, especially underclassmen, kind of come out of nowhere in October, November, and say, "Hey, I belong in that first round mix as well."
It's because corner, just by nature, there's so many lulls, and where they're not doing stuff on film, but also the box score numbers. You can't. Guy might have 22 tackles and 1 pick, so you look at their stat and you're like, oh, I don't see a star here. Like you said, Nate Wiggins gets a pick 6, and all of a sudden you keep an eye on that. Yes. But if a guy doesn't have a lot of action, a lot of box scores, that might not be their fault until you start watching them. And what we talk about with JJ McCarthy in matchups, you don't sometimes get guys until you see, oh. Okay, all right. I'm watching. I'm just making one up here, but I'm watching Florida against Vanderbilt. Oh well, Vanderbilt has a corner. I might have to keep an eye on. Just making up an example, but that's what kind of happens. You have to wait for matchups to kind of bring your eyes to it. You mentioned the Ohio State corner as potential riser. Our next question, another segue. It's like you lined this pretty perfectly.
There you go.
Rich G 780 said, "It's early in the season, I know, but is there a prospect you expect to rocket up draft boards through the All-Star games and combine process?"
So this dovetails nicely because there are a few corners that I don't think would get enough attention, but could see them rising throughout the process. Toledo's Quinyon Mitchell, 6'1", 200 pounds. He ran in the 4.3s over the summer for NFL scouts. I think he's a guy that going to the All-Star games, going to the combine, he'll test really well. I think he'll be a riser. TJ Tampa from Iowa State, another senior corner, another guy with size, 6'3", 200 pounds. Not going to run quite as well as Mitchell, but still going to test well. He's a former hooper, basketball scholarships in high school. The jumps will be pretty impressive. Should run in the 4.4s. So Tampa's another guy to keep on the radar. And then Jahdae Barron from Texas. He had that pick against Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
Coaches rave about him, the impact he's had in the secondary. So those 3 corners, Mitchell, Tampa, and Barron, all 3 seniors, guys that I don't hear talked about a ton. Don't be surprised if maybe those 3 are quote unquote risers between now and April.
No, those are good ones. Like we said, just like from the last questions, that's the position. As soon as they get the clock, oh wow, you got 32.5-inch arms. Oh, you just ran a 4.4 flat. Oh, okay. Oh, let's go back to that tape that we maybe skimmed over before.
And it's a great point about you can't look at the box score and understand what a corner did on. It doesn't tell you. Like obviously,
Sauce Gardner.
Right. And that's why with Sauce Gardner, I was late to the party on Sauce Gardner because I knew he was good, but I was like, okay, is he really a top 5 pick or is he more of a mid to late first round? Because no one targeted him. It was so hard to get a true read on how good he was when nobody throws in his direction.
Yeah.
And I mean, finally, by the time, we get to the draft process, I'm like, yeah, I'm a believer in this guy. He's he finished 5th overall or whatever in my rankings. But I mean, he was a guy that I was a little bit late to because we just didn't see enough targets going his way. And I think obviously you want to see these corners with double-digit passes defended and at least 4 picks, 5 picks, whatever. But it just doesn't always work out like that. And another example of that I've learned from is Martin Emerson to the Browns.
Yeah.
One thing that I really just did not like about him at Mississippi State is the ball production. It really bugged me with him. And I ended up, and I like the athlete, I like the size, I liked his demeanor, but I knocked him down because the lack of ball skills, the lack of ball production, it really turned me off. And I was wrong on him because, even though the ball production wasn't there, and the ball production really hasn't been there in the NFL either, but he's still a really, really good player, good corner. I think the Browns got themselves a steal with he's a mid-third rounder. I think he's a really good player.
But I remember when he got drafted, my only thing I had to say about him was I was like, oh, Browns are sticking to their type. They drafted the youngest player remaining. And I think that's the only note I had on him going into it. I know the guy, we're going to Bleacher Report, the person that was in charge of the DBs, like he liked him, but it wasn't like an overwhelming like. It wasn't like, oh, I have a first round grade on him. But that's the thing. Corners is hard. Corners is hard to scout.
Oh, yeah.
It is such a hard position. I mean, there's so much in between that you have to pay attention to, and you just don't know. And they're so scheme dependent at times too. It's very, very hard.
Some guys you could watch as much film as you want and you'll never see them backpedal,
right.
What they're asked to do in college and projecting that forward. Like it is a very difficult position to scout. Not in every situation, but definitely in some.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So next one, also on Twitter from Josh Trailer 03. How's Paris Johnson Jr. doing so far? He's an offensive lineman for the Arizona Cardinals, his top 10 pick. Not too many people are talking about him, but he seems to be doing pretty well. Dane, did you take a peek at Paris Johnson Jr. so far this season? And what'd you think?
So I did the opener. I didn't get to the Giants game yet, but
perfect. I did the Giants game and I didn't do the opener. So there we go.
Awesome. That works. We did not plan that. I thought he played really well in week 1 against Washington. I was interested in how he would do at right tackle because he was a left tackle and a guard at Ohio State. So this is a new position for him. Washington's got that nasty front, and he held his own in pass pro. I think he had maybe one pressure. I'd say it was like a half pressure. I wouldn't even call it a full pressure. He did have one penalty, but no sacks, no glaring mistakes that led to the offense unraveling. Run blocking was a little more of an area that needs work, but I was really encouraged by what he put on film in week 1.
I was super encouraged. The Giants game was great. A couple of late leak plays, but where a guy wins late, but at least that first 2.5 seconds, it looked great. I also thought this is natural. He was such a young player. And again, did not a lot of time at left tackle and all that. Was his pass sets were a lot more consistent as far as slowing down. You know how he kind of he would always have his shoulder, he would get caught with his shoulders turned a little bit sometimes, and it creates some edginess. And it's like, dude, you're such a good athlete. Just calm down. You're going to be fine. He's already kind of improving that area, which is really kind of encouraging to see as somebody in his second start and he's doing it on the right side. So I think it's also fair to ask him to do it on the right side with his youth. It's kind of scary to have a blind side for a rookie tackle. Also with DJ Humphries and the team makeup and everything. But I think I thought he looked good. I like Paris Johnson a lot going in this process, but I think so far it looks like a good baseline building block for this Cardinals team that needs him. And I've been impressed. I thought I was going to say he was going to do fine. He's doing fine right now, but I was actually impressed of how he's looked so far.
Yeah, and that's if you're the Cardinals, you love that because that's what you want. You want that building block. You want a cornerstone that you can build around. And so far, so good with him. Yeah,
that's all you want. The next one off of Twitter. Next question for a mailbag is that Brett guy, that _Brett _guy, has Keon Coleman from Florida State, wide receiver, solidified himself as receiver 2 in this draft class?
I think solidified is too strong a word for this point in the process, at least. He's absolutely in the conversation for wide receiver 2. Yep. And I can understand the case that he's the favorite maybe at this point. But
I'd say he's a leader in the clubhouse right now,
yeah,
but there's a lot of golf to be played.
perfectly put. Because I mean, against Mississippi State on Saturday, Malik Neighbors kind of reminded everyone
Oh my
why
God.
he's also in that conversation. 13
Yeah.
catches, 230 some yards, 2 touchdowns. His ability to put corners just in a blender with that route acceleration is awesome. Amika Buka from Ohio State, the production, the numbers aren't necessarily just popping off the page, but he had 2 touchdowns on Saturday that were just really impressive. He's still one of the most talented wideouts in the country, new quarterback, so take some time. Eager to see him against Notre Dame on Saturday. The body control ball skills just so good with him. And I mentioned Odunze earlier. So
Yep.
yeah, it's almost like that quarterback 3
Yep.
race. It's going to be fun to talk about throughout the process. There's going to be ups and downs for all these guys, and especially with receivers, it's important to remember that with this topic, just every receiver is different with what they offer. And
Yeah.
as much as we want to say, oh no, this guy's definitely wide receiver 2, or I mean, the reality is the answer is going to be different for each team based on the roster,
Yep.
depending on the type of receiver they're looking for. Keon Coleman and Egbuka, they play the same position, but they don't, right? So it's just
Right.
like one team could prefer one, another team prefers another. It's important to remember that context, or for fans to remember that context as we debate who should be the receiver 2. It's just going to differ depending on exactly what you're looking for.
It's just like even well, when they're all in the same tier, that's when it comes down just what flavor you want, what flavor you
Yeah.
want to pick for your team. We might have a guy built just like Keon Coleman. So, all right, we want more of the kind of bruiser Z or zone beating Z. We might want to like more of a slot guy. Like you never know what these teams want, or we will once the process goes along. But that's exactly it. I think there's a lot in that tier where it's not just like Marvin Harrison, blank tier 1. Okay, tier
Hmm.
2's just Keon Coleman. It's like, no, tier 2's got, like you mentioned, half dozen guys at this point in time. And even what I do like about this receiver class in particular is that it's different than last year's, which had so many undersized guys. And this year it's like, okay, we got some size, like we got some
Yes.
real X's and Z's now, some real guys, vertical guys, and like I said, zone beaters, blockers. So I'm getting excited about that. So I think that's, like you said, it's just always important to remember the tier and also just the flavor that all these teams want.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at my, I just put up my receiver rankings in front of me. I'm looking at just the underclassmen, and like the top 6 or 7 are all above 6 foot. Now, I mean, that might be a little generous with a guy like Egbuka, who's right on the fringe, but I mean, these guys are all decent size, and then you've got a guy like Keon Coleman, who's a legit 6'4",
Yep.
or Marvin Harrison 6'3.5", and Odunze is 6'3". So
Yep.
yeah, it is a receiver group of size and guys that maybe are a little more traditional with what teams are looking for an outside
Yep.
receiver.
I like a Dunzy. Is
Yeah.
I like him. He's of those Washington receivers. He's the one that like is my
Oh, he
kind
he's
of,
he could do everything because he has size,
so
he has speed,
yeah.
he can break tackles. His ability to I mentioned it with the Penix conversation, to rescue throws is
Yeah.
so good. The touchdown he had against Michigan State that should have been an interception went right off the linebacker's hands, and Odunze
Brings it
just,
in.
oh, let me just move over here, let me go get it, and then let me break some tackles into the end zone. Like it's ridiculous. I mean, he's a really good player.
Oh, he's a Vegas guy. I actually didn't know that. I went to Bishop Gorman right down the road
Yeah,
from me.
they've produced
But
some guys.
yeah, one or two. The guy that I'm sticking with my comparison for him is Chris Godwin. So that's my high end comparison for him. But what
Not
role
bad.
I think I could see him as.
Yeah.
Next one from Twitter, and we have two more here. Is from Ski Smith 21. Would love to hear what your top 10 prospects looked like from 5 to 6 years ago. Now that we know what they are as NFL players, who do you regret including, and who do you regret not including? So I believe you looked at your 2018 kind of big board and then that draft class for maybe this exercise.
Yeah, pulling that up. Okay, so hindsight's undefeated, right? We know that.
Oh yeah.
But it is interesting doing these look backs because we've had a healthy sample size of who these players are in the NFL.
Mhm.
Obviously, we right about some of these guys, we're wrong about some, but understanding the process of how we got there is always really interesting. So yeah, I'm looking up my top 10 from the 2018 draft. This was the Darnold, Baker, Josh Allen draft, but also had a lot of pretty good non-quarterbacks that year. Nate, where were you for the 2018 draft?
2018 draft, I was in the AAF.
Okay.
I was just joining the Atlanta Legends and
Okay.
getting that show off the road that the only had a couple shows before that thing closed down. So yeah, but that I was looking at a lot of practice squads at that time.
Hmm.
I was looking at a lot of guys that were recently cut, maybe in the CFL. So that's what I was doing more than looking at maybe this 2018 draft class. I do know
Gotcha.
that Sam Darnold was my QB1 for this class. I was a Sam Darnold guy. So that has anyone
Yes.
that's listened has known that. But I will say my redeeming thing is that Josh Allen was my QB2. So going into this, and then but yeah, I was a big Darnold guy. I thought he has everything I like. He still does. Maybe just not the processing that I've always maybe I've wanted, but I have learned some things. So I'm sure we'll talk about. Who was your
So,
QB1 in this class?
it was Darnold. I was a
It
Darnold guy
was
as
too.
well.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I felt like a Josh Allen apologist, but I didn't rank him as high as that. I mean, I still had him in the first round, but he didn't make my top 10.
Okay.
All right, so I'll just roll through it.
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
one was Quentin Nelson.
Okay.
Now I'm not advocating to draft a guard with the first pick, but this was just a look. He's the best football player I've
It's
watched,
incredible.
so I'm putting him at one. So
Yeah.
it
Oh,
is what it is.
that is. He was
Quentin
all pro
Nelson
right
was
away.
one. Yeah, Minka Fitzpatrick was two, actually, which this is
Nice.
and that's a good example of I was okay being wrong on draft day because Minka didn't even go in the top 10 that year, but
Yeah.
I felt really good about the ranking just because he was such a good football player. Again, just like Quentin Nelson at one.
Best
Give me the best
safety in the
football
game.
player. Yeah, and Minka was at two. Three was Bradley Chubb, pass rusher.
Yep.
Four, Saquon Barkley. Five, cornerback Denzel Ward. Six was
Mhm.
the first quarterback, Sam Darnold. Seven, linebacker Roquan Smith.
Mhm.
Eight was Derwin James. Nine, this is the rough one, quarterback Josh Rosen.
Yeah.
And then 10 was Calvin Ridley. So I don't. Were you on
That's
Twitter
pretty
back
good though.
then? I don't know if
I
you
was
were.
not.
Okay, but
I got on Twitter, or I had a Twitter, but I didn't really like start tweeting till the AAF closed in the
okay.
spring that following spring of 2019.
I just remember so much discourse with Ridley, specifically at the combine. He was a guy that year where all through the process he was the guy. But
Yeah.
then he goes to the combine and he jumped like it was like 31 on the vert.
Okay.
Like his short shuttle was bad. He did well in the 40. It was like a 4.4. But I remember just getting killed in my mentions because all of a sudden Calvin really wasn't good anymore. It was just really strange. I was like, guys, watch the tape. This guy is
Right.
just dusting corners up and down the field with as a route runner with that speed. I don't care if his vertical is what it is. I mean, I'm trusting the tape with this guy,
Right.
and I don't know. That was such a weird thing during that combine. It was all over the place.
He was such a clean prospect. I even like the
Yeah,
mostly even just TV scouting. It was just kind of like, yeah, I mean, this guy's a real receiver, and look how he looks in the pros. He looks like very much a real
he looks
receiver.
just fine. Yeah.
Yeah. A guy like Bradley Chubb, like that's how, what were your kind of feelings on him throughout the process? I know because he tested very well, I believe. And he was just like, I never fully got around on him, but I would be lying if I said I scouted him and like had a report on him or anything. But like, what'd you feel about him? Because I know he was graded high by everybody at that point in time.
Yeah, and I think this was in the time where it's like, okay, Chandler Jones is doing some really nice things.
Yeah.
Brad and okay, Chubb's he's got some of that because he's 6'4.5", 270 pounds. He's long. He ran in the mid 4.6s in the 40. Good athlete, and he was productive. He had back-to-back years of double-digit sacks at NC State. So it's like, okay, production checks out. He's got pretty good tape. He's good against the run. Like I felt like there's a lot of things. Now he wasn't that elite get off Von Miller
Yeah.
type of player. It's just a little bit different. But the way the fact that he could win in multiple ways, that's what really sold me on Chubb, or why I was optimistic about what he could be at the next level. So yeah, he was my third guy I said. So yeah, he was pretty high for me. I don't know if he's necessarily lived up to it. Now injuries
Yeah.
have played a part, but yeah, I thought it was a pretty good player.
He's one of those that he's good, but it's just maybe in a different way than I think people pictured when you take a guy that early in the draft.
Yeah.
And I think that it's that disconnect. It's like he's still a good player and everything. And like,
Yeah,
yeah,
not a
very, very,
Bosa, not a
yeah, but
maybe
he's
not
still
even a Khalil Mack. I don't close, I guess, but it's
it's,
not Chase Young. But yeah, he was
yeah,
taken. What pick was he?
he was taken
Fourth.
fifth
Okay, yeah.
overall.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that his kind of career is always kind of like stuck with me because he was just such a unique guy.
Well,
But the
and that was the year Elway took him instead of Josh Allen, which was a
yes,
big that, obviously hindsight's undefeated again, but,
right.
that I know that was a big talking point.
And LA likes tall quarterbacks. I mean, it was like,
That's
right? And
exactly what Josh Allen was big arm. I mean,
yeah,
yeah, didn't
maybe it was like
happen.
it's too much like Favre. I don't want this.
Mhm.
But going at like by all those quarterbacks, like how maybe did you tier them? And this is not to like kind of go like, oh, you had Rosen up there and everything, because this quarterback class amongst all these ones where a lot of quarterbacks go high did have so many flavors and different types and different
Right.
narratives around them. With Baker and his success and him being kind of like an analytics darling with his stats
Mhm.
and everything and hype around him as far as winning a bunch of college games and the Heisman, all that. But then, yeah, Josh Allen's was the huge wild card. Lamar Jackson was in this class. It's so kind of like, do you remember like kind of your initial feelings with all this? Because I remember the discourse about this quarterback class was just tremendous. There was a
Oh,
lot
yeah.
about it.
Well, I remember I had all 5 in the first round. I thought all 5 were now, how you tiered them, that was always something you debated because a guy like Baker, who's so accurate, you felt good about, all right, that accuracy is that's gonna transition well to the pro game. He's got that subtle pocket movement.
Yeah.
When he's locked in, it looks nice. And hey, it looked good on Sunday for the Bucks when he was locked
Yeah.
in, making some anticipation throws, and Baker when he's on a heater, man, it looks nice. And so I understand why he went one to the Browns. He was my third quarterback that year, but I also had first round grades on then Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
Allen, as people were again talking about Twitter at that time, everyone was anti Josh Allen. I mean,
Yep.
people almost took it personally. It was weird, but I just the fact that he was so big and so had so many tools to work with,
Yep.
it's just the accuracy just got better and better and better. And this is taking into context the fact that he didn't grow up going to quarterback schools and quarterback trainers, and he was still very much learning on the go, and
Yep.
that played a part in why a lot of people had optimism about where he was headed and his trajectory. And then with Lamar Jackson, obviously a Heisman Trophy winner, a guy that there was so much the explosive nature of his game, the athleticism, the way that you felt like he got better, and you can continue to see him getting better. And even if he did need training wheels to start, he was going to bust out of those training wheels pretty quickly
Right.
because he's just too good, too talented to just not be something. And so
Right.
I thought all 5 of these guys were first round players, and
Yeah.
a little surprised Lamar fell as far as he did. The Ravens taking him with the last pick in the first round wasn't even the Ravens' first round pick that year,
Right. He
which is crazy
hurst.
to think about. But yeah, no, it's funny to look at now with hindsight. That's for
I
sure.
know. And that's even for me, my feelings on this class. And again, it wasn't like a deep dive study. It was more just me. I like to watch all the quarterbacks anyways. It was, I had Rosen high too. It wasn't
Yeah,
like, I'm like, ha ha ha, Josh Rosen. You watch Josh Rosen. He threw some pretty balls.
it was
His
clean.
mechanics were
Yeah,
clean, clean. And I could see the path so easily. I was like, yeah, he's got good size. He's a pretty good athlete as far as like, I would say as a creator, but like can throw on the move. And I was like, okay, this
hmm
guy's path I could see just so easily. But talking about like quarterbacks that are already maxed out and getting to the pros, and then also the room for growth and taking a Josh Allen or in basketball, taking a Giannis and just
mm,
going like, hey, what's not like, I mean, we're swinging for the fences. Might as well really jack it, really put a full swing into it. So I liked Allen just for just because of that. It was just like I had an experience of being around a more or less inexperienced quarterback with Dante Culpepper and seeing kind of a project guys work out. Allen was even more of a project, I think, just because it's just everything. And you can never you're betting on mentality and work ethic, but you
right.
never know once these guys get paid. You never know when these guys move across the country. And like, yeah, Josh Allen has worked to create this, what we know him now. So that class is always just a really fun kind of like litmus test as far as how you feel and what you saw. And I think there's a ton to learn from
Well,
because like
it's kind
Darnold's
of
been a great learning experience for
yeah.
me too. Like he really has. Just some of the things that I glossed over before, like as far as like getting to the next read, trying some stuff that you shouldn't
hmm
try. I was like, oh, he'll grow out of it. He'll grow out of it. He'll be fine. He's so young. He's fine. And
That's
then,
it. Right.
yeah.
And he was a
kinda-
redshirt sophomore coming out.
Yeah.
Like he was, but it's interesting comparing that quarterback class to the 2021 class where, with Trevor Lawrence and Trey Lance and Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Mac Jones. I mean, where we're sitting right now, only one of those quarterbacks we feel, just speak for myself, only one of those quarterbacks I feel good about moving forward.
I would agree.
Obviously being Lawrence. And so
And Mac Jones is probably the one I feel second best about. And he was the 5th one to go.
Yeah. But even Mac Jones, like it's hard. You have to really justify why you would feel Mac Jones could lead you to a Super Bowl. Like it's hard to really believe that. And it's kind of crazy just looking at those two quarterback classes with 5 quarterbacks taken in the first round each draft. And the 2 drafts have played out very differently.
Totally differently. The top guy worked out for one. The other one is now on his 4th team, I believe, at this point in time. It's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, that
how much do you think the Jets would love to have Sam Darnold right now? Like it's funny.
Right? It's just
funny how that works. Right.
I know. They got their next one already there. The Jets draft picks are kind of like they show what happened. Who they took Sam Darnold and Zach Wilson. The Jets are at least involved in this way both times.
Yeah.
I think that's going to do it for this mailbag on Prospects to Pros. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you to Dane as always. We will be here again next week on Wednesday. I'll see you guys next time.